Hey, Chris, how's it going, man?
Pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. I love the site that you've got behind
Yeah.
you is so much better than my guitar and my Wade jersey.
Although those are pretty rad, I gotta say.
Yeah, sure. What's that foeder filled with right now? Is it filled with anything?
Yeah, it's we actually keep it filled at all times. So it's got our Saison de Banque Noir, which is our dark Saison. Just kind of really dry, a lot of dark fruit character. It's near the tail end of fermentation right now. Actually, my lab manager is testing everything right now, so I'll find out real soon where we are on that beer.
Cool. That's awesome. Um, so I guess really quickly, just so people who are maybe just kind of tuning in, um, you're the head brewer at Green Bench
Mhm.
in St. Pete.
Yep.
Um, if you haven't been to Green Bench yet, when you go to Tampa, a lot of people go to Tampa, they go to Cigar City, and they forget St. Pete has so much good beer. Um, you got to take a trip to Green Bench. The location is awesome. We were actually just talking about it before we started the interview. Can you kind of describe what you guys were going for with the design of your place? It's a really cool, laid-back brewery.
Yeah, I mean, well, it starts with our building. We have a pretty good lot. The owner of the building's awesome. Kind of that really helped our deal, sort of squaring up this property. But the building itself is almost 100 years old. It was built in 1926. All original ceilings. So we wanted to kind of keep the feel sort of industrial, very old world vintage was kind of the idea, and exposed. We wanted everything to sort of feel exposed. So the ceilings are all original. If you go in the tasting room, it's like really nicely designed by a good friend of ours who actually is a designer in LA. And he flies back like on holidays and stuff and just does design. He's actually here right now building new tables
Oh,
for us
cool.
outside. And yeah, and it's gorgeous in there. The rafters are exposed, like I said, and we have these giant windows that sort of look into the brewery. So if you're sitting at the bar, the actual bar countertop is built. It's all concrete slab, like one big beautiful concrete slab by a local guy who has Epic Concrete is the name of his company, and so he makes these awesome concrete bar tops, and he usually does like sinks and stuff. A bunch of places locally do our bar top. So yeah, it's beautiful in there. It's about 1,500 square foot, and then it's also attached to a 6,000 square foot beer garden that has about 900 square foot overhang of like this cedar overhang that's really nice on a patio. We have bands and stuff. Actually, tonight we have a movie on the lawn. We're showing Home Alone. We have a projector like on the wall, and it projects against the wall outside. So we got a bunch of people sitting outside on blankets and stuff. It's pretty fun.
Now that is awesome. Yeah, the projection and it's like a turf and there's
Yeah.
what's that? Oh man, what's the game that you pitch the tell
The
people
cornhole,
cornhole? I should know that. I went to
bocce
Florida.
ball.
I went to Florida. I should know that. Um,
Yeah, yeah. We're out there playing cornhole right now. We got a food truck out there too, so it's usually pretty packed out in the beer garden. Everyone wants to hang out. We have good weather here, so and we're right in downtown, which is cool. Not many people have like a downtown or I'm sorry, a grass lot in downtown. 2 blocks from Tropicana Field where the Rays play, so it's pretty fun.
yeah, it's awesome, and I know that you kept mentioning that you kept a lot of the original, the rafters are original, and everything like that, and so you guys as a brewery are kind of these. You kind of have the idea of keeping traditions in the St. Pete tradition in general. I mean, just the name of your brewery, Green Bench. For those who don't maybe know the story of why it's Green Bench, why is it Green Bench?
Yeah, good question. Green Bench is actually a reference to St. Petersburg. It actually is synonymous with the city name. We're all from St. Pete, the three sort of operating owners, myself, Nathan, and Steven. And they actually were born here. I was born out of state, but I've been here since elementary school. So Green Bench itself, in the early 1900s, there were over 3,000 green benches adorning downtown St. Pete, especially on like Central Avenue, which is right where our brewery is. So St. Pete used to market itself as the city of the green benches. So that's kind of the nod to sort of this old St. Petersburg history. And even our beer names all are like St. Pete references. Happy Hermit Pale Ale is a reference to Silas Dent, who was this hermit that lived in Coconut Key off the coast. Time magazine wrote an article about him in 1948 called The Happy Hermit of Coconut Key, so we took that name and used that. And like that's just one example of sort of the history I try to incorporate in everything that we do, just about our city that we love. So.
What is it about the history of your city that makes you want to do that? I mean, I noticed that, and the reason I ask you the question is that a lot of breweries will incorporate their city's history. Just 45, 30 minutes north, we mentioned them again, but Cigar City does a lot of, the Cuban-themed names in their beers, and we talked about it a little bit with Wayne, why it's important to him to have that connection to the culture of the city. Why is it important, you think, to connect to your city like that?
Mostly because, well, for us, it's home. If we have an opportunity to discuss why we opened a brewery in St. Pete, which is usually a question we get, like, why'd you open a brewery in St. Pete? You could have gone anywhere. And that's true, but something that, we didn't have when we grew up here was, were things like our downtown scene. It was pretty dead when we were growing up, man. It was like all downtown was boarded up. There was no businesses down here at all, and it was lame. We didn't want to live here at all. So we all moved away. Went to college or whatever, and we kind of would come back, and to be a part of bringing people, I think, to this area, young people opening these awesome businesses, to be a part of that was something we couldn't really turn away from. So any chance that we get, the one thing that we had when we lived here was a cool history, but no one cared because at the time it sucked. So anything we can do to kind of make it cool, and then obviously be able to tell our story is what we want to do, because we love this town. So.
Yeah, that's another big kind of and we're going big picture here, but it's kind of a big social aspect, I think, of craft beer. Now that we're coming into the new year, the new legislative session will start. I'm happy you mentioned that. I've been a big proponent of craft beer politically, and I think the reason is that people had these assumptions about beer, that craft beer is completely destroying the original assumptions people had about it, because, and again, through Craftman, I hope we're educating people about this, but you guys are helping to revitalize downtown St. Pete. You guys are adding culture to the city. When you go to St. Pete, you can walk from brewery to brewery. There's food places popping up now. There's things to do in the city, and people are loving St. Pete again.
Of course.
Do you at all feel responsible for doing some of that? Is that something that you guys kind of weigh on your shoulders? Is that something you guys try and shoot for?
I think we mostly just try to highlight what's rad about the city, more than like we feel like we're making it cool. We saw that it was cool. We saw the spots that were awesome. We saw the historical, sort of references that we can. Anytime we can nod to a historical reference that we know is really cool, we're going to do it because it was cool. We just thought we'd help out by showing people that it was cool. But yeah, I mean, we're by no means the only people, in downtown St. Pete trying to revitalize the city somewhat, and just bring an awareness to, the culture that we have. I mean, you look at beer in general, though. I mean, you mentioned beer, especially in the legislation coming up. Beer, for hundreds of years, has been such a vital component to culture in mankind that it's common to bring your kid, to a restaurant or to a bar and to drink there with them. And post-prohibition, well, even pre-prohibition, the states in general, let alone, our area, just didn't really have a culture, like a beer culture. So anything we can do to sort of create one and then sustain one is what we're trying to do. Like, you go to our beer garden all the time, and there's families running around, there's kids running around in the beer garden, very family-friendly, and we always wanted that. When the business plan was being written and we would sit down and talk about it, we're like, I want someone's whole family to just show up and the kids to have fun, and that's what it's all about, man. Because beer, I mean, for me, it's such an important part of my life that, regardless on who else is in my life, beer's going to be so dominant. So anything we can do to sort of incorporate and create a culture around it is what we're trying to do as well, and show that St. Pete can have a beer culture, like part of the lifestyle of these, young professionals that are living all around us and moving in all the time can be beer. That's a part of their life.
Yeah, I mean, it's like we talked about it in the last couple interviews I've done, but it's kind of like, or conversations. Gotta remember the terminology here. It's kind of like we're going back to old times where you go to your butcher, baker, and brewery, and Absolutely. You go home and you have something local. And to tell you the truth, when I got married, my wife, we almost moved to Europe. That's what I love about Europe, is that everything is so locally driven. People support their local businesses, and I think craft beer and the farm to table kind of mentality in restaurants now is really driving that again here in America. And I think it's really important that we do that. I mean, there's the mom and pops need to be represented just as much as any chain should, even more, I think.
I agree. More, yeah, more. I would say more too. I mean, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I've used that same term so many times in the past. We're getting back to that, that baker, that butcher, that brewer neighborhood. Something that I think is really important. Obviously, personally, running a business, but I mean, even before that, is I mean, you look at sort of local sustainability, the ability to sort of economically sustain yourself and thrive. I mean, you can break that down even to neighborhood sustainability that I think is extremely important that we're nowhere near yet, I think, but we could get back to a neighborhood sustainability where all of our money is here locally and we're all supporting each other's small businesses. And because we have passion for them, that sort of passion is going to make the products better. And that's the only way I think we all can make and live off of the best products we can make. I mean, I'm a big foodie and I love restaurants and farm-to-table restaurants, specifically local food. So anything I can ever do to support any of those is I eat at a lot of farm-to-table restaurants just because I support that so much. I mean, it's quality of life in my opinion. You mentioned Europe. I mean, when I've gone to Europe too, it's the ability. It's food and drink are so vital to our culture, and the best if we can have the best in the local, which is usually local. I don't know why you'd go anywhere else.
Yeah, I mean, it's the freshest. It's the best for you.
Yeah, it's good for you. That's the other thing. Like you're not ruining yourself. So.
Well, it's awesome, and so there's a lot of that popping up in your area, St. Pete, Tampa. You got Bob down in Tarpon Springs, I believe. Tarpon Springs. Yeah.
Northwest, but yeah, Bob's awesome.
I mean, yeah, up in north, and you got Dunedin.
Yep.
As some people call it, Dunedin.
Yeah, from Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. There's a lot of competition there. A lot of people say, "Oh, how much competition can this market sustain?" And it looks like when you go to other cities that have had a established craft beer scene, it can support a lot of competition. Do you find that you're constantly trying to step your game up because of all the great brewers that are opening up around you?
I'm constantly trying to step my game up because I can't sleep at night if I don't. It's far more personal than that. It's far more like I pile it on pretty hard. I always have new projects and new ideas and so much on the horizon that I just do it because I love it. I mean, I just have such a passion for it and it drives me. And I literally several times just wake up in the middle of the night and just can't sleep because I'm coming up with concepts and writing things down, and I'm so involved and so 100% into it. I think that when it comes to the growth, so long as everyone's making awesome beers, we're going to be fine, especially considering I think it's less the amount of breweries and more the amount of beer. Because even if we can have 40 breweries on this strip of Central Avenue right here in front of me, and we still wouldn't make the same amount of beer that the local community drinks. So it's less like the amount of breweries and more how much beer. The barrelage per year is so tiny that I don't think it's so minuscule. It's almost kind of laughable sometimes to think that there's really any competition. It's 90. I'd probably say in St. Pete alone too, at least 95%, if not 97, 98% of the local market is still macro. St. Pete's a very uneducated beer town, and so that presents itself as a challenge, and it's exciting and it's hard to deal with. But that's 97, 98% of the beer is not us. So we're not even close.
It's a cool way to look at it. No one's ever mentioned it that way. No one's ever talked about it as barrelage. They've always talked about it as amount of breweries. But it's a cool way to look at it because, and on top of that, I think each of you guys have your own identity too. You're all known for your own kind of things.
That's exciting too. That's something I said that earlier today to someone. One of the most exciting things about St. Petersburg right now, this craft beer scene that's sort of blowing up for me, is that we're all doing something so different to one another. Like the ability to sit in our tasting room and explain to someone what we do, and then say, "But dude, if you got on the cycle, dude's making some of the best session IPAs I've ever had in my life, some of the best aged stouts in the world." Head over to St. Pete and St. Pete Brewing Company, which is a block from them, and you're going to get a completely different vibe, completely different styles of beers, which are awesome, well-made, clean beers. You go to Three Daughters just outside of downtown, and same kind of thing. They're bigger, they're more, and it's a different business plan. Nothing's right. Like none of us have it figured out by any means. We're all doing something so different from one another, and that's one of the exciting things about it is like there's no correct business plan for a brewery. It's kind of what you feel comfortable doing and what you have a passion for, and so anyone can go to a different brewery and get a completely different vibe, completely different types of beers, which is honestly, I actually said this to them too. One of the biggest struggles I have in the tasting room when people come in is the uneducated market. We get the whole, oh, do you have something like Blue Moon? Do you have something like, that kind of question, light beer or whatever? And it's kind of funny because I always found that question hysterical. Like, why would I make a beer why would you ask for a beer that you aren't getting here? Like, you're literally asking for a beer that you know of. Like, just go get that one. I always thought that was kind of funny. Like I'm not gonna make the beer that you think you want. I'm gonna make a different beer, and if you want Blue Moon, I can tell you where to get it. It's completely fine. I always thought that was kind of funny.
It is funny. You see that a lot too, but I think people are being a lot more educated now. It's growing really quick, man. The mentality inside of tap rooms that I've noticed going into other people's tap rooms, it's kind of crazy to hear the conversations going around as to what they were even just a year ago.
Oh yeah. I mean, we're a year old, man. We opened September 25th of 13, so we just hit a year. I mean, a couple months ago. So it's been a whirlwind. So
it's cool. Now, where you mentioned you weren't originally from St. Pete. Where are you originally from?
Memphis, Tennessee.
Nice, Tennessee.
North Memphis, off Boulevard.
There you go. And so when did you end up coming to St. Pete?
I was about 9 when I moved here. My father was already here. My mom, my family are all back home still. I moved here when I was a kid, and I grew up here with my dad. Frankly, because I wasn't a very good kid, and needed some severe disciplining, and I was failing school, and it was horrible. So
we're gonna get into your dad now in a second, but before I finish this off, because for those of you who weren't watching, it took me like 30 minutes to get this going today. But I'm
just you, man.
I'm drinking. This beer looks beautiful. Sour Farmhouse Blend No. 1. I'm not representing you in the glass, but we'll do it. There we go.
There it is.
Can you give us a background on what this beer is, how you kind of came up with that concept? Is this one of those like you wake up at midnight kind of beers, and this is what you thought up, or is
basically that beer is the beginning of a series of beers that I've been wanting to do for a little while. So the concept is, so the biggest thing in our brewery right now, well, biggest, it's hard to say, but one of the cool things about our brewery is our foeder program, where we opened our doors with a foeder. That was a very unique one, which we'll discuss, I'm sure. The concept with that beer, though, and the series involved, was I wanted to make sour versions of all of those farmhouse sales coming from our foeder. So I created a stock golden sour, and the purpose of this beer is it's 100% a blender. It's not to be sold by itself. Its purpose is just a blend. It's like 5.5%. I think it's 5.5% clean, like nothing to it, just sour beer. I took that sour beer and put it in a tote tank, and it sits in my drive-in cooler. Just that's it, still. And so every batch out of our foeder, I take a sample of the foeder and a sample of the sour, golden sour, and I come up with a blend that I want. Once I taste the blend, I come up with like, this is the blend I want. I taste it, then I decide what I want to age that blend on. So the first one, oak fermented, sour farmhouse ale No. 1, or blend No. 1, was our rye saison fermented in the foeder, blended with a stock golden sour, and then it had this awesome floral note to it. So I decided to sort of accentuate that. So I just basically aged it on a bunch of edible flowers. So it's nasturtium, dianthus, pink sage blossom, and marigolds, and it was a lot of them. So I just put it in stainless, and essentially the dry hop technique, but just with flowers. Right. And it had this awesome bouquet, and so that was it, man. It's just clean, a very clean sour, a super clean oak fermented saison that has a lot of rye in it, so cool spice, and then flowers.
Yeah, you definitely pick up the spice. What I love about it is that it is clean, 100% through. Even the nose is really clean. It's like you're saying, it's like a non-offensive potpourri.
Yeah.
Like it's really nice, clean. And what's cool about it too is like we were talking about it before we started. Also, is like it's dry, but there's a residual sweetness to it. And you can even pick it up in the nose. Did you notice that coming from the flowers?
Yeah, well, I'll be honest with you. I think I noticed it most from the rye saison. Just having had that base so many times. One of my favorite things about that beer is that, I mean, we're coming out of our foeder at like point 0.8, point 0.6 Plato, which is very dry. So there's almost no residual sugar left over in it. But that beer, and one thing I love about the foeder itself, our house farmhouse strain, which has literally been in the foeder over a year. I haven't cleaned it in between batches at all. And with that said, you would assume it to not be as clean as it is. That's something that's really amazing about the foeder. It's making some of the cleanest farmhouse sales, frankly, I've ever had. But that specific beer has this awesome, like the perception of sweetness more than actual sweetness, that I think really balances out the spice from the rye, and it's very, very low bitterness unit as well. There's almost no bitterness unit in it at all. It's like I think 18 bitterness unit on the recipe. So, but it has this really cool sort of sweetness to it that isn't really sweetness. So
Yeah, I mean you don't get you don't get bitterness at all. But when it hits like the front of your palate, you get a little of that pepperiness from the rye. I'm assuming.
and the
And
yeast too. Our yeast is really phenolic, and especially the way that the temperature profile that we use when we're doing fermentation. I like to increase phenolics as much as I can in the beginning of the brewery, in the fermentation that is in the brewing. So that's keeping the temperature a little bit relatively low for a farmhouse ale, and then allowing that to slowly ramp up, but not too much, because I like that really peppery saison that's sort of blended with some soft citrus here. So.
sure. Yeah, and my palate's also really weird. I pick up stuff that a lot of people don't, and then
Right.
they pick up stuff that I don't. But like some of the sweetness, like it kind of comes through as like fruitiness, not just like random sweetness, but I kind of get like a really you might think it's like way off, but at the end of the palate, like in the beginning you get that tart rye, and at the end I'm getting like a really ripe mango almost.
Yeah, no, I get that. I definitely get. I get like this cool tropical sweetness. That, like you said, it's not like dextrose. It's not like sweet sugar. It's like sweet. Yeah, I guess say tropical fruit. It's got this really cool fruitiness to it. So yeah, mango is definitely not far off.
Yeah, I mean it's beautiful too. Is this something that's available? Is this in the tap room now or?
Not yet. So we bottled that one. We just bottled like a little bit over a week ago the blend number 2, which is actually what I'm drinking now. And we're also going through the process of every batch bottling versions of our saison. So we haven't packaged these. They've only ever been in kegs before for the first year. So I really want to get these a little bit out in the market, not anywhere like far by any means, but I'd like to be able to start selling our saisons, our farmhouse ales, which I'm super proud of these beers in our tasting room and some select sort of accounts locally. So to kick that off, I wanted to have with it the sour blends. So I did the sour blends and packaged those, and I'm not going to release those until we also release the bases, so people can have specifically that batch next to that blend. And so then you really taste the rye saison and then blend 1, and the saison de Bonfer, which is our core brand farmhouse ale, and the blend number 2, that's the base for blend number 2. So that's kind of my concept with the farmhouse package. We so far have the base saison, the rye saison, the 2 blends, and we have the La Banque Belge or Belgian IPA bottled, and then the Noir is next, and we're going to do a blend of that one with the sour as well. And then I have no idea what I'm going to age that on, so we'll see when I don't ever like have an idea of what I'm going to age it on. The blend tells me what it needs, so that's kind of the concept.
Cool. Yeah, that's really cool. You can get the blend and the base. I mean, that's awesome. Because it would be really cool to see this right next to the rye saison. Yeah. All right, we're going to backtrack a little bit. So we were talking about your dad. What's really interesting about your dad is that you were, as a kid, I guess, watching your dad brew.
Yeah.
What type of stuff was your dad brewing?
Well, okay, so I was pretty young. I'm pretty sure he like stopped brewing by the time I was like 13, but he did it for like 3 to 4 years or so. From what I remember, so this is funny. So when I turned like 21 and I decided I was in college. I wanted a hobby. I was bored. It's like I want to do something else than just go to college and work. So I was like, I need to do something. So I was like, well, my dad made beer, and like he seemed like he really liked it, so I should try it out. But I realized pretty quickly that I had no idea. I didn't know anything about beer. But what I remembered was my father saying, brown ale this and porter this and stout that and IPA this and pale ale. And so I remember the style. I remember that there was more in the world than the macro conglomerates. And I mean, being a fairly young guy, it's not, I guess, surprised that by the time I was 21, there was a lot of craft beer around me that I could start drinking. So I was fortunate enough in that first. Well, I realized I don't know anything about beer. How am I going to make beer? I don't know anything about it. I don't even know if I like it. So a year drinking and just sort of researching styles and like how they're made and the history, and talking to my dad a lot, asking him a bunch of questions about what he did, asking him if he had any leftover equipment, which he didn't. I guess they garage sold it all, so I had to get everything back from the beginning. And so that helped out a lot as far as sort of inspiration on beer. Just I would never probably have known there was as many beers in the world if it wasn't for my father having done that. I mean, I remember as a kid, he'd have a burner outside or whatever, and I'd help him just like stir it or something. And I think I remember telling him or telling my stepmom, like siding with her pretty regularly, that, oh, you're making the house stink and what are you doing? And but he had a whole setup. He had the fridge in the garage. He had a tap on it. He had kegs. I mean, we used to go to Bucks games all the time, growing up, Tampa Bucks, and he bottled a bunch and made labels. And he named all the beers like after the Bucks players. So he had like, All-Star Pale Ale and like Derek Brooks Porter, or I don't even know those names, like John Lynch Pilsner, I don't know. But so he made a bunch of beers. I never got to have them. I never had my dad's beers, which is actually kind of unfortunate. I wish he and I could hang out and drink some of his homebrew, but so.
That's cool. That's cool. Even about the.
Speaking of which, my father is literally right there. What's up, dude? He just missed off. That's weird.
That's hilarious.
He's walking in. I just gave him this whole spiel.
Oh, look at that. He heard it. His ears were ringing.
Yeah.
What's the first styles you started? I guess when you started in college, what's the first kind of stuff you took a crack at?
So when I started brewing, I mean, like I said, I'd spent like a year drinking pretty heavily to figure out what I liked. And, I mean, IPAs were it. I really wanted to make an IPA. So the first thing I did, I went to Southern Brewing and Winemaking in Tampa, which I eventually started working for. And I bought my first homebrew kit. It was like Extract West Coast IPA, I think is what it was. So I made an IPA, I made a Pale Ale, I made a Brown Ale, and then I decided to make my own beers. So I basically took a month off to save money from brewing, and taken that money and built all grain equipment. And me and my dad actually built the mash tun together. He had a cooler in his garage, and I was like, "Hey, dude, what are you doing with that?" And he's like, "Nothing." So we built this mash tun, and he came over to my house. I wrote a recipe, kind of a West Coast style IPA. He came over to my house, and he and I brewed it together, and that was the first beer I ever wrote and brewed, and it was like my first all grain batch, and I won a statewide medal for that beer. And then it was IPAs mostly to start out.
Yeah, I was gonna say you won an award for the first beer that you write the recipe for. That's gotta be pretty mind blowing.
Cool. Yeah, it was cool. I enjoyed that. Yeah, I won it was a statewide medal, and then that beer's won a lot of beers. Actually, the same recipe as our Green Bench IPA. It's our base IPA in the tap room right now. So it's our core beer.
It's like you're following. It's like you know what I'm gonna ask next. That was my next question. Is that something that you guys have at Green Bench? Yeah, your IPA is awesome, so I can.
Yeah, we.
That's cool.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You guys have a lot of styles generally on tap, don't you? I mean, from what I remember,
Yeah, I mean, it's been a while. Yeah, I tend to how I describe our style. Again, we only brew beers we love, so I have to preface usually the crowd locally with that. Our beers for the most part are hop, they're hop forward ales for the most part. I mean, our cores are like we got like basically 4 or 5 IPAs are our cores. They're very different from one another, but they're all extremely like aggressively hopped. We have I try to keep about 4 stouts on. One of my favorite styles is Irish dry stouts. I think they're so underappreciated, and I think they're perfect for Florida for our climate. So I made one called Stay Dry Stout, and it's a pun because you can't usually stay dry in Florida. It's either so humid or it's raining all the damn time. So it's like 5%, super dry. And the idea with that beer was I wanted to be able to drink a stout year-round. So I felt like I made a beer that you could do that year-round with. We have a double stout, coffee stout, milk stout. So we keep those on. And then a bunch of Belgian beers and beer.
I like the double stout a lot. That thing's
Thank
nice.
you. Sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah, Greenhouse is a fun beer.
What's the? I know you guys. Well, we're kind of skipping around here, but actually, let me talk about this one because I just poured the
Oh,
one
pour
of
the Mad One.
the Cellar series for the Mad Ones. It's a sour, like you can see here, rye sour brown, aged in wine barrels. You get those wine barrels big time. I get the Cabernet. I was reading it, the label, because I could tell it was like a red wine, like a big Cabernet, something like that.
Right.
I get it big time. What is other than what I just read off the label? Can you describe this beer a little bit?
Yeah, so this is batch one. I got a lot of series. I just realized that this is batch one in a different series of beers called Web City Cellar. So Web City is another St. Petersburg reference. There was a drugstore downtown St. Pete in the early 1900s called Web City Drugstore, and about 30, 40 years later, the drugstore turned into this little shack, turned into this 77 department store. Like it had like cafeterias and coffee shops and beauty salons and like all this gimmicky stuff. But he kept the name Web City Drugstore, and he coined the phrase "world's most unusual drugstore." So I was trying to figure out what we call our cellar room. We have a climate-controlled cellar room on site that essentially is like a glorified big closet that has like a temp control on it, and so we can control all. I want to do barrel-aged sour beers,
Right.
and so we can hold about 16 barrels or so in there, just sort of stood up at a time. So we named the cellar room Web City Cellar, world's most unusual cellar. So that's kind of the name behind it. So I named the first beer for the Mad Ones. That is a Jack Kerouac quote. I was an English major, so I'm going to go on to pontificate this a little bit. We for the Mad Ones is actually one of my favorite quotes from Jack Kerouac's On the Road. And a lot of people don't know he actually died in St. Petersburg at a hospital. Like I could throw a stone and hit it almost behind me. And yeah, he's the father of the Beat Generation. So he has this quote about he's only searching for the Mad Ones, these people that are sort of crazy and out there and weird, and he loves them. And so that's kind of the concept of the beer. And the beers in this series, they are for the Mad Ones. It's a wine barrel-aged sour beer that's been sitting in a barrel for 9 months. So it's kind of for the Mad Ones. I consider myself one of those Mad Ones. I search for these styles. They're my favorite styles in the world, these flavors that I'm always looking for. So it's kind of a preface to this is not for everyone. So this beer specifically is a pretty complex malt bill, a brown ale essentially, with a lot of rye that we kettle soured with lactobacillus to 3.1 pH. Afterwards, I ran post-heat exchange directly into Cabernet Sauvignon barrels that I purchased from Sonoma County. In the barrels, I pitched Brettanomyces glycinii, so Brett C, which is one of the more neutral wild yeast strains cultivated that you can find in a lab. So then I put that into our cellar room where it fermented 100% in the barrel on Brett C, so 100% Brett beer, and then it aged there for 9 months. And then it was after that I kind of went back, tasted all the barrels, and then blended them back together, and that's the beer. So the feature of that beer, basically I wanted to make a true American sour, American-style sour beer, which means, well, for me it was the flavor profile I wanted was a complex malt bill with a nice spice from the rye that sort of shines through everything else. A lot of acidity, super, super dry, and barrel character. I wanted to taste the French oak. I wanted you to taste the sort of dark wine character as this.
Well, you you succeeded in that.
Really cool. Yeah.
Again, I mean, it's like a beautiful, beautiful beer. The clarity's, you can't really see the light. Let's see.
Clear, it's in the bottle. Yeah.
Maybe if I turn this light off. Hold on. I don't know. Whatever.
It looks nice.
It's a really nice beer. It's what's cool is like there's not a ton of head on it, but it's like you said, it's super dry, super crisp, super clean. But you get those massive, big red wine oak notes to it, like really prevalent in the all throughout the palate, which is really, really cool.
Well, I knew I also wanted to have Brett, obviously, for the American sour part, but I didn't really want the Brett to be super strong. So I used Brett C, which is like the most neutral Brett, and then I also did 100% Brett, so you're not going to get sort of the normal quintessential flavor profiles from Brett that you're usually going to get, that sort of horse blankety kind of character.
Right.
And also Brett afforded me the option of making it extremely dry because they're highly grains. So that it was the perfect, I think, strain for that profile that I was looking for. So it worked out. So that's
Yeah, I love it. I love how clean, how like light it is up front, and then as you're finishing it, on the back of the end of the palate, you get that big red wine note. It's really cool. It's a really nice beer.
Glad you like it, man.
So this was already bottled. Obviously, there's a label on it and everything.
And it's a wood, the label is actually wood veneer. So the label itself is unique to itself.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about that because yeah, you can see the wood grain. It's really
I thought
cool.
that was pretty rad. I was
Yeah,
walking by the company that in CBC in March, and I was like, that's my label. I want that one. It was pretty cool. So literally every cut to itself because of the wood veneer. The concept with the series basically is that every year we'll release 4 separate beers from that Web City Cellar series. So you'll get 4 different essentially wine and or spirit barrel aged sour beers from Green Bench every year.
cool. Is there? You have any idea what the next one's gonna be?
I've got a few ideas. Yeah, so the next one actually is called the Famous Flying Zucchinis. And the name comes from the Zucchini family, who they kind of popularized the human cannon act, like you find in circuses. In 1922, that's when they sort of started it. But Doc Webb, the guy that owns Web City, actually hired them to do that outside of his parking lot at Web City drugstore. So we call it, it's called the Famous Flying Zucchinis. It's our Saison de Banque Noir, which is our dark Saison, which is actually in the foeder right now. So it's a foeder fermented farmhouse ale that I ran into apple brandy barrels, and I pitched the Brettanomyces bruxellensis strain. So that's been in there since February, so almost a year now. So I think in January or February we're going to take it out of the barrels. I'm going to blend it back with base noir because it is super boozy from the apple brandy, and then pitch a little bit more Brett and let it sit in the bottle. So the Brett should tear up any of sort of the residual noir post foeder, and then we're going to release that one in March during our Foeder for Thought event, which is our sort of annual Tampa Bay Beer Week event. So.
Foeder for thought.
Actually, cool. Okay, yeah. So the next one after that, you'll dig this, is collab with Wild Oak with Matt and Khris.
All right, my buddies.
Yeah. Love those guys. So we had them up, and we brewed sort of a tropical farmhouse ale into the foeder, and we ran that into Chardonnay barrels that I had sent in from Napa, and we pitched the Brettanomyces Dreifonteinen, the Bruxellensis strain from Dreifonteinen strain. So yeah, that one's awesome. So that'll be the next one we release in the beginning of summer.
Not to take attention off Green Bench, but those guys are doing some amazing beers. And
they're awesome. They make such good beers, man. I have like 2 of their bottles in my little personal cellar under my office. Like I basically just keep beers there. I've got some rare barrel beers, a bunch of Wicked Weed beers, Chester King, Jolly Pumpkin, Wild Oak. You know, so it's
right. It's incredible. You know, I love Wicked Weed. Wicked Weed might be one of my favorite breweries in the country, if not my favorite brewery in the country right now. Jester King's another one that everything you pop open from Jester King is just mind blowing.
Immaculate, yeah.
And it's like I go to tastings and I take Wild Oak's beers and everyone's just kind of like they're the same level.
Matt's making beers as good as any of those places we just mentioned. So yeah, he's a buddy of mine. I really like that guy, and I love his beers. So I was excited to brew them. I'm happy.
Yeah, it's cool you guys got together to do that because that's again, it's kind of the culture of beer. It's like, you know, they're not. By the way, for anyone who hasn't had their, you should get them now before you have to pay for them.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, anytime you can. I don't know if I want to be like the sort of bearer of bad news, I guess, but I guess they have to change their name. They had like a lawsuit thing going on. Right. So if you are looking for their beers, I would say look them up on Facebook now and just follow that because I'm sure they'll post whatever that's going to end up being, so you can follow them because they're awesome.
Yeah, that sucks, but I've been pushing them along. Come on, it's not going to be the killer.
Yeah. They're still going to make rad beers no matter what they're going to be called. So.
Yeah, it's cool. All right, as far as like your history in brewing is concerned, so you pick it up in college. You see how like this is like these conversations are like an insight into my mind how all over the place I am.
No big deal.
You started college, and then you end up brewing with Cigar City, right? When did you start with Cigar City?
I was homebrewing for about like 5 months or so, And then I went into Cigar City and I said, hey, can I volunteer? And actually, that was the same day I had Hunapu for the first time. It was just on tap in their tasting room, and some guy it was kind of creepy. There's this dude next to me who was like, I walked in and he's like, he swings over and looks at me and he's like, you ever had Hunapu? And I'm like, whoa, dude, like I don't want your drugs. And he's like, yeah. So he starts listing off like what it all is, and I'm like, yeah, I'll get one, and it blew my mind.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's phenomenal
It
beer.
happened to me, man. It's the exact same thing happened to me. It's kind of weird. It's like the exact story.
Weird, dude. He probably got the creeper. So yeah, so I went in and he back then you could just walk in there and do whatever you wanted. So he gave me a tour of the place because he was like buddies with Joey, and I kind of just asked if I could volunteer one day. So I came in like that next week, and I was pretty fortunate. I was on my volunteer day. Most people are bottling beers and stuff. I was like mashing in on the mash tun. I was graining out. I was having these really cool conversations with Wayne, and a couple months later, he approached me and kind of said, "Hey, dude, do you want to work for us?" And I was like, "Absolutely." And he's like, "We need you on the team." And I was like, "Cool." So I started working there. Basically, started unpackage, and within 3 weeks was offered a promotion in the inside because I brought a bunch of beers and people were pretty. And Doug worked there with me from Cycle at the time, and Doug was like, "Yeah, dude, we got to get you brewing tomorrow." I was like, "That's cool." So it actually didn't end up happening though. I never actually brewed beer at Cigar City because there was you got to go through your rankings or whatever. But I left after about 9 months, and then I started working at Southern Brewing and Winemaking, the homebrew shop where I bought my first kit because they wanted to open a nano brewery, and so I helped them do that. I wrote the licensing with them. I wrote a bunch of the recipes and brewed most of the beers there at the time, myself and Rick, who was there. And in the meantime, I wanted to own and operate my own brewery, so I wrote a business plan. And then I through a few failed attempts to open a brewery, eventually met Nathan and Steven, my current business partners, and the three of us opened Green Bench together.
But you kind of ran through my line of questions.
I think I was doing that halfway through, and I was like, I kind of wanted to ask that probably, but...
It's all right. I can get creative. I'm going to go back. All the way back to Cigar City. Hey, that's what I get paid to do, man. I get paid to question people. So at Cigar City, I've had conversations with Wayne, and the guy is a complete and utter genius. What's funny about him is that he's so quiet, and then when you open him up on a subject he likes, he just boom goes. So what?
Quiet, yeah.
I mean, the first time I met him, it was at a beer event down in Miami, and he's got his backpack on.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he's kind of hiding on behind the rep, the brown rep. Now he's a Cigar City rep. Oh, was he with Cigar City? Now he's the Cigar City, Florida guy. And he's kind of hiding, and then he sees me and goes, "Hey, you want to meet Wayne?" I said, "Of course I want to meet Wayne. That's why I came." So introduces us, and then I asked Wayne, I said, Wayne, I haven't brewed a sour yet. What do you think? And then he goes, looks at me and goes,
"You're off."
Yeah. How long do you have? And I go, "How long do you want to talk for?" And he goes, "This will take about an hour and a half." And I go, "An hour and a half?" So he takes me out, and I get my phone out, and I'm trying to look all cool by taking notes. Dude, the notes that I took were such a pile of shit.
Yes, there's no way to compile all that. He's bouncing all over the place. You think this conversation's moving around? Wayne's awesome, man. Wayne's my man. He can, when he does walk around, it's kind of funny because I know a lot of people are like, yeah, is Wayne okay? He's kind of not, personable. And I'm like, just go talk to him. You're going to learn a lot. And he's such a nice guy. He's been such a help of mine. Honestly, I consider Wayne probably one of my first mentors in brewing, and still is. I still send him messages all the time. We talk on the phone, ask him questions all the time, bounce ideas off of him. He's so knowledgeable, and obviously just write some of the coolest, best recipes you're going to find.
Yeah, I mean, I noticed that he's one of the nicest guys in the world. He did the interview with me. I mean, I just started the website. I mean, I think he made it my second conversation that I had on the website. And I was like, there's no way in hell he's going to do this. He's like, yeah, we had some great conversations, man. I would love to do this. So the guy leaves his family on a Saturday. He goes, I can't go back into the brewery. I know that you're having trouble getting time to come up. You're going to be here on Saturday. I will leave my house. My wife's going to kill me. But I will meet you at 7th Sun. And so I go, you're there, I'm there.
Yeah.
And it was the whole time his phone's ringing. He's like, oh, God, this is terrible. You can see how conflicted he was. felt so bad, man.
That's awesome.
What were those kind of first conversations with him like with you? I mean, were they kind of like technical questions, or was he?
They
I don't
never
know.
asked me. I mean, I would say some of my first conversations probably shaped me as a brewer, especially my conversations with Wayne, about just how I go about recipe formulation. I don't know how much he'd probably want me to say any of this. Wayne said to me in one of our first conversations, we had a conversation and then I gave him a beer, and he said when he wanted to hire me, he said I've not actually met someone that thinks about recipe formulation and beers the way you do. You're the first person I met that sort of has that similarity, and so that meant a lot. It was all philosophical talk. I mean, there was technical, obviously, words used, but it was sort of your philosophy on writing a recipe and what you're trying to accomplish in the glass, and that's the part that he said, he had never met anyone that had that same vision before.
Right. In what regard?
I mean, it was in regards to recipe formulation and how to accomplish and how to create the flavors that we were looking to create, and I mean, it was very philosophical. It wasn't like you're writing a recipe the same way I am. It's more like you're conceptualizing a beer the same way I do. That's what it really was, and that meant a lot. Not just allowing me to feel like I'm going in the right direction, but also giving me someone that I can talk to, that I knew that I can always go to Wayne and sort of ask him questions. And there were a lot of times where I would bring stuff. He's like, yeah, he would give me all the and now running a brewery, I sort of get, I'm like, yeah, I would never do what I said I would do when I as a home brewer at Cigar City years ago. So I don't know, they were inspiring, man. They kept me on track. He believed in me. That's really it. And him and Doug, again, Doug from Cycle, those two really, really believed in me when I was just this young punk making beer at home. And Doug would come over to my house and drink beers with me, and he invited me to the first Florida Vice Festival. He wanted me to bring beer there. I was just a home brewer, and he liked my beers, and I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for those two dudes.
That's awesome. Those two guys produce some of the best stouts you'll find, and some of the nice, I guess you can call them Florida Vices, the fruited lactose sours.
Right.
But as stouts, I mean, they're producing some of the world's best stouts, and they're right down the street from you.
He released Nooner today, Nooner number 8. I think it was the hazelnut one.
Right.
I go to every one of the bottle releases and grab a bottle myself. That's in that same fridge. I got like a Nooner 7, I think, and like a Rare DOS and like a Rare DOS. And it's something that I'm gonna open by myself because it's a little high in alcohol and everything. But it's good for like when cool people show up. You want to come up, man? We'll pop a bottle open.
Oh man, that's gonna happen. That's gonna happen. So, that Nooner's awesome, and I can't imagine what the hazelnut's kind of gonna be like, but
he's good. He's really good.
So at Southern Brewing, how long did that stint last for?
Almost 2.5 years. I was there for a long time. It was good. I taught brewing classes for 2.5 years too. So I taught brewing classes. When I first got there, they didn't have the brewery yet. They hadn't moved to the location where we opened the small brewery. So I was working on a homebrew shop, making beers at home, and then again just working on the business plan. And I graduated college while I was there, and then like a year after I worked there, then I graduated. And so then it was just trying to open my own brewery, but in the meantime, brewing beers on their system and teaching brewing classes. So quite a while.
And I guess this is the follow-up question I was supposed to ask before, but so Wayne was talking about conceptually coming up with the recipe ideas. This is what I find like really interesting. When I talked to Wayne about it, he mentioned how much the culinary aspects influences recipe creation.
Yeah.
I guess that may have been where I was trying to go before with my question of, in what regards did he find you to be kind of similar thinking as him with recipe creation? But I guess when you sit down for a recipe, how much of it is inspired by, or at all by, kind of food pairings or food flavors, or, what are the concepts behind like a beer like this? This is phenomenal. when you sit down to kind of write this, what's going in your head as far as, how do you start putting that pen to paper saying this is what I want?
Well, I'd first start with saying that was probably the thing that shocked me the most when he said that to me a few years ago. Actually, February, I think, is exactly 6 years from the day I brewed my first batch of beer. So yeah, just a few years ago. And I'm not really culinary inspired. I don't make food. I don't. I wish I did. I just don't know why I don't. Really. But so he's very culinary. And when he said that to me, that's what shocked me the most. 'Cause I'm like, I don't really think about food when I'm doing it. I mean, I love food to death. I eat food all the time. I'm always talking about food, but I don't make food, so I don't really understand the science of food as much as I do beer. I more think about how I want the beer to taste in the end, like what I think would be a rad like beer. But more importantly for me, it's all process for me. It's like what process. If I come up with a concept that's like really cool and complex, how do I make it? And so like for me, it's like the path is, they always say the destination isn't really the what you're looking for. It's the path that matters. And
Right.
I think that's how I feel about beer. It's like the destination obviously is the most important thing because it's the quality of the beer and seeing how well you execute it. But it's developing process in which to create the flavors that is most intriguing to me. Today I literally spent all day coming up with another series of beers that we're going to be doing. Essentially, we're going to start in January next month. We're starting a 100% Brett series. So, yeah, they'll all be stainless fermented. But I spent most of my day, frankly, talking with Jason Yester from Trinity Brewing in Colorado Springs like all day. So I'm just like, me and him are talking about these processes and the types of beers I wanted to make and what I wanted to accomplish and how I'm going to do them. And I think the series is going to be a collab with him. So, yeah, he's awesome. He makes some of the most inspiring beers for me, at least. So it was more about like the process more than it was the final product when I was kind of designing how I do it. And the concept for that one, I mean, I guess I can say it. So the 100% Brett beers, we're going to do like a lot of base beers, like 100% Brett APA and 100% Brett, stout, and anything we want to do with sort of neutral Brett strains. But I want a series within that sort of 100% Brett series that is we pick an ingredient, and about 20 to 30% of the fermentable sugars will come from that ingredient, and then it's fermented with sort of our house Brett culture. Then I pair that ingredient with a specific hop. So they're single hop beers with a specific ingredient of a certain percentage of 20 to 30% of the fermentable sugars, and then it's Britannomyces bottle conditioned as well to sort of showcase that sort of flavor profile. And that's just like this, but it was far more the final product, like conceptualizing, like how do I build that? How do I use this ingredient, and how do I change it every time and make it exciting? And then I had to come up with how I was going to brew it. So for me, it's always working backwards, but it's always I'm most intrigued about process than I am food, which is weird.
It's cool, but does food go into your? I mean, the answer doesn't have to be yes, but does food go into your kind of? I guess the idea of the final product, meaning,
Not really. I mean, I think about food a lot. I mean, I love food, but it has less to do with my beer. It's such a separate thing to me. Now, I do drink my beer sometimes and start craving some type of food, but I never design the beer with the intention of having food with it. It's just food just goes well with beer, and I'm fortunate enough with some of my beers they're so delicate sometimes that we can pair them pretty easily.
Yeah, I can see this for so much. I mean, what's really cool about the two beers that I've had today while we've been talking is that they're total food beers. I mean, they're just so total food beers. Like, I would love to have like 10 bottles of sitting around when I do Christmas dinner. I mean, it's just because they're like, this is huge red wine, but it's still so delicate. I mean, it's really
very delicate. Yeah, it's very it's complexity, while not being aggressive. Like, I guess that's kind of how it's a super complex beer, but there's not, and it's layered. It's really nice. It's gentle. So
yeah, I think that's the best way. I think that's exactly what I was going for. It's very complex without being in your face aggressive, which is really, really. I mean, it's just awesome. You're talking a lot now about Brett, oak aging, saisons, farmhouses. Is that kind of direction you see Green Bench taking? You're going to kind of focus on those kinds of beers?
Yes, yeah, we're investing a lot of time into sour beers because, frankly, they're our favorite beers. It's my favorite beer in the world to make, and my concept for what we make, my sort of I don't know if you call it like a mission statement by any means, but sort of what I pride myself on is making beers that I love, only because I feel that if I love it, if I'm passionate about it, it's the only way I'm going to make the best product I can make. And I hope that that passion pours through in the product. I hope people can taste it and say, like, this was done with care. This was done with sort of intent. And so that's sort of our concepts. And so because we love them so much, and because they've been coming out pretty well, we feel comfortable sort of continuing that direction. I mean, I'll be completely forthcoming.
Yeah.
Sorry?
No, you're going to be forthcoming about what?
Any kind of sour beer you can think of. Every technique you can think of doing with sour beer, we're probably going to do it one day. Whether that be spontaneous fermentation, we're actually working on a cool ship program right now to start some spontaneous beers. I mean, any sort of approach to sour beers, we want to eventually tackle them. Now, when we open, and even now, we're limited on space. We're limited on just a lot of things that keep us from doing all those initially, and frankly, that's probably a good thing. But what that meant was I had to sort of, because I liked the style, I had to get really good at making sour beers otherwise. So, we sort of adopted the kettle sour technique. I really pride myself on our kettle sour beers. I think on the market right now, we have as clean as you're ever going to find in a lacto fermentation. Kettle sour. And here's what I looked at with kettle sour. I was like, all right, well, if I'm going to make kettle sour beers for the first 2 years, they need to be unique and they need to be phenomenal. And so I thought about, what is kettle souring allowing us to do? It allows us to create, in my opinion, the cleanest version of lactobacillus creation, essentially, of lactic acid that we know of in the industry. So why not literally make it your goal, your brewery's life goal, if you will, to make the cleanest lactobacillus fermentations anyone's ever had. So I researched it a lot, and I worked on it a lot, and I think that we make some of the cleanest sort of lacto fermentations there are. And I would say it may not be as complex as sometimes some of the sour beers we'll make in the future will be with sort of wild mixed fermentations. But they will be the cleanest ones because this is what this technique affords us. And then I'll make those as well, those sort of wild, funky, complex ones that have a complete different node and aren't necessarily just as clean. But all my kettle sour beers will be the cleanest ones I can possibly ever make, because I think I think if you're not making the cleanest ones, you're not kind of doing it right. So.
Right. I mean, I think you're right. I think you mentioned something a little while ago. When you said you want there to be intent behind the beers. When you taste the beer, you want there to be intent. That's a big thing, when it comes to scoring wine and things like that. I think people who watch these interviews know I always bring wine up. It's just, but that's kind of what got me into these kinds of beers in the first place. I was a huge wine guy first, and that's one of the big kind of things people look for in wine is there intent behind this wine. You can kind of tell when there's just, you ferment these grapes. Okay, great, you made wine, and then you can tell, like, this is where the winemaker wanted to go. And, I'm not trying to kiss your ass, but there's definitely intent in these beers. When I'm drinking them, it's a very clear, concise, like, to the point taste, flavor. But there's also, like you said, a lot of layers to it. And I think it's important that brewers, and I'm happy you said it, pick up on that intent. And I like to use that word. Is there a way that maybe, coming from a brewer, not somebody like me, that you can kind of describe what you mean by intent?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that all of our beers, again, I guess it always starts with that context, right? With that conception. When you think about, like, what I want this beer to be in the glass, what I want it to eventually be, I always, like I said, I pride myself sort of on the process, or not pride myself, I guess that's the wrong term. I'm interested in it. I'm intrigued by sort of process and figuring out how to create this beer that I imagine to the best of my ability. So every step that I take there's so much intent behind it. There's so much. It's deliberate. It's so deliberate because I'm looking for a specific thing, and I don't make a step without feeling like I completely understand it to a point that I can make it. I'm very conscious of some of the things we do, process-wise, and I sort of refuse to do anything without feeling like I have a complete grasp of it, which means doing a lot of research. I mean, I research all the time. I mean, I mostly before any of our projects, I've been at least for a year researching that specific thing, and frankly, honestly, developing my own process for it. I mean, you look at the foeder. Foeder is a great example. I intended to make the cleanest sour beers. I'm sorry, that's wrong. The cleanest farmhouse ales that I could in oak. That is like a very hard task. Like that is like, I mean, just the concept of oak alone, you think wild, you think crazy, you think funky, you think wild. So I wanted it to not be that, so I had to, over a year, for almost 2 years, I had to develop a process for using a foeder and honestly designing our foeder for that process. So I had to, or for that outcome. So I spoke a lot with Chad Jacobson of Crooked Stave and Gabe Fletcher of Anchorage Brewing and Lauren Salzer of New Belgium and Tyler King of the Brewery. Not that he has a foeder, but he knows sour beers very well. And just so many people that had so much knowledge and experience with them that I actually came to them with my concepts, and every one of them said the same thing to me. They're like, well, yeah, no one's actually doing that. I couldn't pick up the phone and call someone and say, how do you do this? Because no one was actually doing what we're doing right now, which is we ferment all of our farmhouse ales 100% in a custom-built foeder. Our foeder is 75% French oak, 25% American oak staves, and I've literally never cleaned it. I've never cleaned the foeder once in over a year. And every beer is coming out this insanely clean saison, and that was the intent. That was deliberate. That was the purpose. So the reason we don't clean it was because my thought was, what is the best way? What's the best defense against wild microorganisms, whether they be yeast or bacteria or whatever? And what I kept coming up with, first of all, no one had an answer. What I kept coming up with was the inoculant itself. My house strain would be the biggest defense against anything else. Now that doesn't mean, yeah, exactly. Now that doesn't mean that if you take my beer and you put it on a shelf out in the hot sun for the next year, you're going to pop it open and it's going to be clean again. But that means that when you try it, when I release it, it's going to be extremely clean and it will develop complexities over time that I find fascinating. So we're going to do some crazy stuff with these as well, like bottle conditioning them with Brettanomyces, which I think is going to be a lot of fun because the bread itself in the bottle, that's another culture that's going to beat out anything else in the bottle over time as well. So that's just sort of another opportunity for not only for the beer to gain complexity, but for it to stabilize itself. So again, all this stuff that I just said, like that was all intentional. It wasn't anything that like I stumbled upon by any means. It was a lot of research, it was a lot of thought, and I meant to do it. So I think that's what I mean by intent and sort of it being deliberate. It's the same thing with all of our sour beers. The reason my Oud Bruin tastes the way it does is because I specifically wanted that beer to taste the way it did. And Surrealist IPA, our sour IPA, the way I wanted it to taste the way it did. Another one that's a super complex beer, but it was completely deliberate, was our Wood Parade beer, which is Your Silent Captain. Wood Parade's another series of beers we do. It's our Spirit Barrel Aged series. And Your Silent Captain was the first beer, and it's got a lot going on. It's an apple brandy barrel aged tart cherry imperial stout. It's brewed over a pound of cherries per gallon of beer. It's actually slightly acidified with lactobacillus, so technically it's a sour beer because I was afraid I wasn't going to get the tart character from the cherries alone. So that step alone, like forcing, if would otherwise associate with tart cherry, because there was 4,500 pounds of cherries in this thing, actually came from a bacterial strain. So that was all intent. That was all deliberate. I did it all on purpose because I wanted this beer to taste a certain way, and that's really the part that excites me the most. So
I can't wait to get into that bottle. Yeah. You sent me one of those, and I didn't want to do it by myself sitting here because I'd be slurring all my words by the end of the interview.
Yeah, it's a fun beer. I'm excited to know what you think. Actually, we have more Wood Parade beers coming out in the next couple of months, so it's going to be cool.
What's really cool about, like you were saying, your wood-aged beers is how clean they are. Like we keep going over that, but they're so bright and crisp, and they're not the real funky horse blanket smell, but they're just so clean. I mean, it's clean. It's a really nice. This could be. I I think this could turn a lot of people on to sour beer that haven't had sour beer.
Right. I'll say two things. Okay, please.
No, well, I guess what I was gonna say was I find a lot of people, you give them like the brewery makes amazing sours. I think they make awesome sours, but I think if I was if the first sour I was given to try was one of the brewery sours, I may not have done more because they're in your face. I mean, puckering sour, they're funky. But something like this it's sour, it's got a little tartness to it, but it's so clean and the finish doesn't leave your tongue just like, oh God, you know, I mean.
The malt complexity balances the beer out pretty well.
Yeah. My mouth's still watering every time I take a sip of this, but it's not like, you know, to the point where I'm like drooling off myself.
Right, yeah. Okay, so I'll say a couple things of that. First, I do love wild, funky beers, obviously. I mean, frankly, the beer I'm drinking now, the batch, the blend number 2, it has a cool funk to it, but it's mostly like delicate, fruity funk from the Brett that's in the bottle, mixed with this awesome sort of dry hopping that I did with that one. So I like those beers. I like those aggressive, in-your-face sours, especially ones that the brewery makes. I mean, they're experts at the style. Again, I go back to our technique, though. I'm not making beers the same way the brewery is. I'm not making beers the same way, for example, Corey King is. Yeah, yeah. I mean, look, I'll go ahead and say this right now. I was in St. Louis a few weeks ago, and me and him did a beer trade, and I have some of his beers in my cooler now, and I know you did an interview with him. Corey may have the best sour beer I may have ever had in my life. A few of them. Like, I think they're incredible, incredible products. Now, but my beers, yeah, they're unbelievable. But my beers aren't brewed the same way. These ones aren't. Again, one day I hope to make every kind of sour beer you can think of. But my beers didn't have the intent. I never intended for them to be like Corey's beers. Because I'm doing the kettle souring the way I am, my focus, my goal is to make the cleanest sour beers you've ever had in your life. And I think that if you're going to make kettle sour beers, and we have with us the opportunity to make the cleanest lactobacillus fermentation, why not accomplish that the world has ever seen? We can make the cleanest sour beers the world has ever seen because of this technique. And there's so many brewers, especially in the state of Florida, unfortunately, that are making kettle sour beers that I don't like really that much at all, because they aren't clean. Because not clean kettle sour is a completely different flavor profile than not clean mixed fermentation that for example, Corey King is making, or that even the brewery's making, or Rare Barrel or Wicked Weed. They're doing it. They're pitching, you know, wild organisms in a barrel, and they're going to make awesome wild characteristics, but they're acceptable wild characteristics. Kettle sour wild is not acceptable. It's not like, actually, if you handed that to any of those other brewers, and I've had a lot of conversations with those other brewers, most kettle sour beers they dislike. They don't like them at all. They're like, I didn't believe I would like yours, and I had yours and I liked it. And it's like, well, that's because I'm not trying to make funky beers with kettle sour. I'm trying to make clean beers with kettle sour, because you get completely different funky flavors from kettle sour off flavors than you do with like sitting in a barrel funky complexity. It's just, they're different things. You get that sort of cheesy feet isovaleric characteristic, and even like isobutyric you're going to get sometimes from kettle souring. It's not acceptable in sour beers. And unfortunately, I have like customers that honestly come into our brewery and they'll say like, oh, I had such and such's beer from whatever brewery anywhere in the world, let alone Florida. I've had some people come that were outside of Florida, and they're like, I really like that beer. And I'm like, oh man, that had like, and they'll specifically say like, oh, it had that stinky feet, like vomit kind of character. Oh, that baby diaper was awesome. And I'm like, what? Come on, dude. Like, that's the last thing I need anyone to be making. So I'm an advocate for kettle souring. It can be done, and it can be done so well. I just think it should be clean. That's all. Get off my high horse.
Yeah, you get some of those, like there's some of those flavors like you were saying, like Corey's beers.
They're amazing.
That huge barnyard funk.
Dude,
but you're blown away by it's just, again, they're clean, but they're really funky.
The funky is, but they're not like, it's not like unwarranted funk, like, right? It's like it's acceptable threshold levels of like perfect, complex, weird, wild flavors that you're looking for, and his beers have that, man.
Right. It's like Jeff from Jester King. Their beers, again, super funky, but they're clean. I mean, it's.
I'd be remiss if I didn't throw Jolly Pumpkin obviously in there, but Bob at St. I know we mentioned him, but like Bob's been making some of the coolest, best wild beers a decade before anyone around here even knew what the hell that was. And you look at Prairie. I mean, you look at Chase. I mean, he's making some awesome wild beers as well. Just
I was so sad to learn Bob retired Surge. He's not
Surge was so good. Like, I honestly, that kind of breaks my heart. I didn't know that. No, I didn't know that. That sucks.
Yeah, this is his last batch.
I'll tell you the beer of his that when we were buying beers at Southern, we used to have all the time, and it was Caitlin. And it was like the citrus wild farmhouse ale. And he did a few batches with Citra hops, and he couldn't get Citra hops. And I guess he like actually tried like orange wedges like in the beer too, and to like mimic the flavor of Citra, and it worked so well. That beer, we kept that beer on tap. Whether or not anyone else was drinking it, it was because I was like, this is what every farmhouse ale should taste like. Like, it's so good. And then Seven Fun, I have to throw them in there too. They're making some of the best sour wild beers around here.
Yeah, he's extremely underappreciated by the new age beer nerd. You know,
Dude, nobody appreciates Bob. I don't get it. We opened our brewery with 6 collaborations, and one of them was with him. And so he asked me, like, what do you want to make? I was like, well, let's do like a traditional saison, like table saison, like what I would consider traditional. So low alcohol, assertively hoppy, because they were pretty hoppy beers. And they had 2 wild yeast strains in them. So they had his base farmhouse strain, which actually has Bruxellensis in it with a saison strain. I said, and now let's keg condition it with Brettanomyces lambicus. And that beer was awesome. We called it the Saint des Banc Vert because our beer is Saison des Banc Vert and is obviously Saint somewhere. So yeah, I had that beer like a year later after we released it, and it was like so acidic and tart and like beautifully like complex and funky. And I'm like, Bob's the man.
I hate that I don't know, like, it's not like said, it's not spoken. I guess I'm saying it now, and I feel bad even saying it. But I just feel like he's so underappreciated for what he's doing and what he's been doing. I mean, he's a master of this style that people are now learning about and getting into, and he's been doing it for so long.
And everyone around here is saying like, oh, you can't find those beers. I was like, Bob's been making them for over a decade. Like, he's, you know what I'm saying? Like, they're there.
It's crazy.
I mean, yeah, not every beer is a home run for anyone, right? But like, he's in so many states with just amazing beers. I talk to people out of state and they bring them up. You come
Especially when he's doing the beers in the style he's doing them. I mean, it's kind of hard to make it is what it is. Each batch can be completely different potentially from the last one. I mean, it's
really old world, man. It's like it's almost like as spontaneous as non-spontaneous beer can get.
Right.
Which is cool. And yeah, dude, I drink them. I like them.
Is there a dream collaboration you have? If you can put Green Bench and another brewery on the bottle label?
Yeah, I'm such a fan of like so many brewers. I draw inspiration so many places. It'd be difficult to pick one. Frankly,
that's the easy answer. I want.
You want a specific? I mean.
Yeah, I want your dream answer, man.
All right. Well, any brewery, obviously, that's making sort of amazing lambics. I consider lambic to be to me, it's the most respected style in the world. Not only is it timing and sort of a little bit of divine intervention, but it's also the blending is so spectacular. If I had to say like an American brewery, frankly, it'd kind of be a toss-up between 3. It's Sean Hill from Hill's Farmstead would be amazing. I would love to brew with Russian River. I mean, Benny's the king, I think, of sour beers in America. I don't know if there's a brewery that's ever been able to make sour beers as consistent as his. I've had Supplication several years in a row, and it always tastes the same. It's always awesome. Consecration's the same way. Like his sour beers are so consistent, and I think that he has a grasp on that consistency that like I mentioned, sort of the Belgian brewers sort of have, where you'll drink Cantillon Goose, and you're not necessarily talking about a vintage of Cantillon Goose. You're talking about how, damn close these, this 10-year-old goose is versus this 2-year-old goose is, because so he's, in my opinion, is like the ultimate sort of sour brewer. New Belgium's obviously huge. I think they're right there with Russian River. I mean, I guess you could say the penultimate sour brewer in America. would probably be New Belgium for me. But I mean, I have such fans of Rare Barrel, what they're doing, of the brew, what they're doing. I mentioned Corey King, dude. I would like love to brew a beer with Side Project or Perennial. Um, Jolly Pumpkin would be good. Uh, and then I have some that I do. There are some people on that list of brewers that I love and I adore that I actually am brewing collabs with. You know, like Trinity, the Commons. I'm supposed to brew a collab in February. I'm flying to Portland to brew with the Commons in February, and they've been one of my favorite breweries for a very long time. Jester King, we're supposed to be brewing a couple beers together, and Wicked Weed, I'm brewing a couple beers with them. So there are people on that list that I'm huge fans of that happen to be happening. But the ones that I just mentioned would be ones that we haven't yet. You know, the Jolly Pumpkin, the Sean Hill, the Rare Barrel, the Russian River, New Belgium. So Funkworks, I got to throw them in there. Man, Funkworks is awesome.
What a beautifully political answer you just gave me.
It was the exact opposite. It was literally.
Yeah,
I like people.
I'm gonna take away from that if you're gonna say Russian River or Hill Farmstead in America and Cantillon abroad.
Yes.
Right.
Oh, Dre Fontaine in it. Cantillon as well. I gotta go Dre Fontaine and Cantillon. I'm on. Just have two.
All right, we'll give you two. I'll give you two. That's cool. That's fair enough. Yeah, this beer. I was gonna ask you. This is the Rye Sour Brown. For the Mad Ones. Any inspiration from Supplication here?
Well, oh yeah, no doubt, man. No doubt. Right. There's no doubt in my mind that beer was had some inspiration from Russian River. I mean, the other one. I mean, you look at it's La Folie as well. You know, I mean, those are probably the two beers that are these sort of sour browns that inspired me to sort of make that beer. That was my first one I made. I brewed that beer in January this year. And it was the first Web City beer. It was the first barrel-aged sour, and I wanted it to essentially pay homage to Vinny and Lauren and Eric and Peter from New Belgium, and because their beers have inspired me in America more than anyone else's, and those specific beers are the ones. I mean, I'd say between those two beers, the other one that sort of inspired me is also from New Belgium would be Le Terroir. Something that Kettle Sour has allowed us to do is explore hops in sour, which was frankly banned from sour beers forever.
Right. Like the idea of a sour IPA is such a new thing.
Yeah, so I do a lot of sour IPAs. I would say another inspiration is Trinity. They do some awesome sour. Red Swing Line's a great sour IPA. So I'm not buying. And Commons does some sour hoppy beers, but I'm trying to sort of popularize that style. I think hops and lacto go really well together. So we do Surrealist IPA. We did Colliding Galaxies, the sour double IPA, which was aged on American White Oak, all Galaxy hops. That was a good beer, which was in that article you sent me. And then we also did a collab with Seventh Son, was called Second Stage, and it was dry hopped Berliner Weiss. So these hoppy sours, I would definitely say, Le Terroir was a big inspiration for me for hoppy sours.
Yeah. I mean, I could pick them up in what I've had so far. Where do you see, if you could say that you want Green Bench to be in one place, doing one thing in a year, what would that be? And then 5 years from now, what would it be?
In one place doing one thing? Is that what you asked?
Well, like, what's your, I guess if you had a 1 year goal. If you
1 year. 1 year. Okay. I said one thing in general. All right. In 1 year, so you mentioned earlier, and I didn't get a chance to touch on it real quick, about our focus. You know, we are focusing on sour beers, wild beers, farmhouse ales, because they're my favorite style. But I would hate to neglect our cores. You know, I mean, our cores are our Green Bench IPA. We sell more of that than anything else. We make more of that than anything else. I love that beer. Our Happy Hermit Pale Ale is essentially like a session IPA. It's 4.9%, a lot of Galaxy hops, essentially like the international pale kind of category. Skyway Wheat, which I've had a hard time selling a lot of people. Most of our reviews are like, wheats can't be hoppy. This sucks. 1 star. And it's super hoppy, like American style wheat. But it's like all like, it's like Citra, Sriracha Ace, Amarillo.
That sounds awesome. I mean,
Yeah, dude.
Boulevard does a wheat IPA that they
I
distribute.
know, dude.
Why?
Oh, I know, dude. That beer was based off of Three Floyd's Gumball Head, which for a long time
Yeah,
has been the best wheat I've ever had. You look at Little Something Something from Lackawanna. That's also a pale wheat, and it tastes like an IPA. But people can't. They don't. They're like, they can do it. You can't, Chris. So I get yelled at about that one a lot. So that beer is only like 4.4% alcohol. And then the last sort of core IPA would be our micro IPA, which I sort of kind of coined that term, I think. It's called DeSoto Low. It's only 2.3%. And it's got like Simcoe, Citra, Columbus, like insane hop, but it's my boat beer. You know, I can go on the boat, I can go to the beach, I can golf and not get wasted with a 2.3% hoppy beer. And so I would say that in a year, my goal is to have these cores on draft at a lot of places. The hope is that by the end of 2015, we're also canning those cores. So
cool.
hopefully those beers will be around town for people to sort of pick up, take to
In Miami.
Yeah, well, we'll see about Miami right now. But maybe the end of 2016, we'll have my cans in Miami. But in the Tampa area, at least, we'll have sort of our package out there. Hopefully, we'll raise awareness for foeder beers. I think they're some of the most complex, amazing beers in the world. I'm not just saying my beers, foeder beers all across the country. The biggest moment of my career so far for me, I literally teared up. It was amazing. GABF, we sent beers out to Denver, and we were, from what I understand, the first brewery that Crooked Stave ever tapped other than themselves at their own tasting room at the stores. So we had 6 beers on tap of my beers, and I'm sitting at Crooked Stave, who I just absolutely adore, Chad, and his beers. And he's been such a big supporter of Green Bench. And that was a big moment for me. So raising awareness for beers that he makes, that New Belgium makes, that all these other people that have foeders, Anchorage, is huge for me in a year. So I would say honestly, focusing on our core stuff, focusing on raising awareness for Green Bench and getting those sort of IPAs and stouts out of the door. In 5 years, in 5 years, I hope to be making basically every kind of sour you can think of. 5 years is going to be fun because in 5 years, I hope to release the first sort of, I don't want to like use this term to kind of piss off the Belgians, but what you would consider a goose. So I hope that in 5 years we release our first blended spontaneous beers from 4 years of making these. So we've already started, essentially spending money on that project on spontaneous.
Cool.
So
That's
it's already
cool.
Yeah, we've already started the commitment. So in 5 years, that's my hope. My hope is that in 5 years, our sour program is big. Our cores are all over. They're definitely all over Miami. And I don't know if I have much aspiration of really sending my beers outside of Florida, though, that much. I look at sort of the new Glarus model, they're damn near 60,000 barrels a year, and they only distribute in Wisconsin. I think that Florida, we drink more beer than, frankly, any other state. So it's just going to be raising awareness for craft and getting people turned to it, and hopefully our beers are all over the state.
It's all the retirees drinking all the beer.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to go to Florida and retire and drink this.
And drink for the mad ones. That's what they need.
Yeah. Hey, man, so I think that's it. Unless you have any parting words that you want to leave us with.
I would just honestly say just thank you to everyone that's supporting us, to you and everyone in the industry that sort of supported us. I mentioned a bunch of them already. Wicked Weed, Rare Barrel, Cricket Stave, Anchorage, New Belgium, these breweries. Vinny, I was in Santa Rosa. You mentioned wine. I was in Napa a few weeks ago. My best friend just moved to Napa, so I drove out with him. That's actually when I went to St. Louis to see Corey's place, and I actually stopped by Prairie and hung out with Chase. We hung out that night.
Nice.
I'm supposed to brew. I'm brewing with him this year too. Yeah, he's the man. I got to give Vinny that bottle. I walked into the brewery at Russian River and said, I wanted to give you this, and he had some nice words to say, so that was cool. So just thank you to anyone that sort of has supported us, and I'd say just like keep drinking, man. Like I'm just trying to raise awareness for these kind of beers and trying to make them the best of my ability, and support is kind of overwhelming. We got the next Wood Parade series is coming out. We're releasing our Russian Imperial Stout in I think February. So that beer is going to be out for the first time in bottles. It's kind of an American interpretation on the style because we mentioned Cycle and Cigar City, who are making arguably the best Imperial Stouts I've ever had. So I tried to, while still being in the same, hopefully, conversation as their beers, mine's very, very different. Mine's like an American interpretation of the style, so it's drier than theirs. It's far more assertively bitter and far more roasted, like heavy, heavy roast.
Cool.
We also, the next Wood Parade beer, we're releasing 3 at the same time. So we're actually going to release 4 bottles at once. It'll be the base Imperial Stout. The first Wood Parade is an apple brandy version, barrel-aged version of that beer, a tequila barrel-aged version, and then a double barrel version where we blend the tequila and the apple brandy together. And then our Food for Thought event, where we're going to have some awesome beers on tap from Anchorage Brewing and Cricket Stave. And I don't know if people know that, but we're the only place in the state of Florida that's ever had Cricket Stave and Anchorage on tap. We had them last year. Yeah, so we'll have a bunch of, every beer on tap's a foeder beer. It's the night before Hunapoo's Day, so if you're coming up, come check it out. We'll have a bunch of oak sour beers around and stuff, Wicked Weed Cinnamon beers, and it'll be dope. It'll be dope, man. So, just look forward to, I guess, the bottles, and if anyone has any questions, I'm always here for beer education. So.
Awesome. Hey, I thank you for sitting down with me, man. It's cool to have kind of your approach to beer here in Florida. We got a lot of really different breweries opening up for people who watch from out of state, which I know there's a lot of people that are kind of fans of the site from out of state. You know, our craft beer, we're at the infancy stage still, but it's incredible to have breweries like you really pushing the boundaries of what craft beer is and doing it, I mean, in a manner that's world class.
Thank you very much.
So, you know, to that extent, I can't wait to see you guys have planned. I hope I can get up there soon. Like I was telling you, I used to go to Tampa all the time.
Right. Getting tied down, man. You're busy. Old ball and chain deal going on.
she gets in there with me.
Yeah, bring her up, man. I'm saying we ought to just kick it. That'll be fun.
Yeah, man. So hopefully soon. But again, thank you so much. I'm happy to hear how good you guys are doing. The 5-year plan sounds amazing. Having a Florida, let's say the Belgian Gurza goose will be really cool to become out of Green Bench, the first kind of like real traditional goose coming out of Florida. And man, this was awesome. This is a lot longer than our normal conversations are because it was so good I didn't want to cut it off.
I don't even know what time it is, man. I just talk. My bad.
It's awesome. I didn't want to cut it, man, because it was cool. So thank you so much.
I look forward to chatting with you. You know, when we have more stuff going on and projects are big, so we'll do it.
Yeah. But we can revisit. I left a lot of stuff in my head that I want to know, but we'll revisit later. So.
All right, cool.
All right, man.